In Texas, there is a bracelet necklace that you can wear that's basically an out-of-hospital do not resuscitate. It could be a vinyl band, or there could be a form, which actually is the most common. Now we'll talk about organ retrieval. So it may be that we run on patients who are very much seem as though they're basically brain dead. They're not going to survive. But provide care. This honestly never really factors into how I treat patients because I don't think about it. I think about taking them and giving them the best care possible. If you do, however, recognize that a patient may be a candidate for organ donation, meaning they've got some sort of injury that has led them to brain death. Has led them to brain death. But their organs are still viable. Then identify the possible candidates. There may be a donor card in their wallet or a sticker on their driver's license. Check on the nature of their injury and notify the proper officials. Ultimately, though, this is going to be a decision the docs and the ER make. And we're going to provide care, assuming that they will recover from it. All right, so a little bit about records and reports, and then we're going to have a whole other lecture on how to actually write records and reports. But here is the information that's pertinent to the medical legal stuff. It needs to be complete and accurate. It needs to be legible and neat. An untidy or incomplete report is evidence of incomplete or inexpert care. A lot of times the only thing that people have to judge you on is your report. So your medical director may not have met you yet, and he'll see one of your reports and it's not legible. There's a bunch of misspellings. It's missing some information. He's going to assume that you're a pretty crappy EMT, and he's going to have to call you in and talk to you. And it may be that you're really an awesome EMT. It's just that your documentation is terrible. So now I'd like to talk about patient confidentiality and privacy practices. So there are federal laws that protects patients and patients' health information. So the health information is called PHI, or Protected Health Information. And this is information in any form. So oral, you can't talk about patients. You can't publish anything about patients that has protected health information, and any electronic information is also protected. It's our responsibility to ensure patient confidentiality. The patient has a right to privacy. Their information is kept private, and that's the patient's right as well. We keep confidentiality to maintain our reputation of professionalism, to maintain the service's reputation of professionalism. And it's nobody else's business who has what medical condition or what happened to who. It's no one else's business. So when can we release protected health information? And it doesn't say anywhere in here, but PHI includes name, date of birth, and then basically anything that you would probably write about your encounter with that patient. Now, you can make things confidential, but if you can still, or somebody can still read, maybe a paragraph of your narrative and link it back to a particular person, even if their name or birthday is not there, then that's still considered protected health information. Now, we can release it for continuity of care. So when we give a report at the hospital, that's okay. We can give them a copy of our chart, and that's actually something we do, and that's important. We can release if it's requested by a judge, not just by law enforcement. Not just by law enforcement. But if it's requested by a judge. We can release it if it's required for billing purposes, or if it's subpoenaed, and when the patient signs an information release form. There are some special reporting requirements that we have as EMTs. If there's a child born outside of the hospital, maybe the mom doesn't want to go to the hospital. Maybe she's healthy and doing well. Maybe she had a home birth. We have to report that. So follow whatever protocols are in place for your system. Child abuse. Child abuse must be reported. You will lose your license if it's found that you chose not to report child abuse. And this is in any situation. This is not just if you're working. This is if you're at your kid's school play and you see something that has you concerned that a child is being abused. You have to report it. The best way is actually to report directly to Child Protective Services. There is a website that you can go to. I'll put the link in D2L, but there's a website you can go to actually report it. I would say reporting it to law enforcement doesn't necessarily relieve you of your duty to continue reporting it to CPS. You should report it to law enforcement, and you should report it to the emergency department physician. But you still, regardless of who these guys you report it to, you need to report it to Child Protective Services. And that, again, I'll give you the website, and there's a phone number as well. Don't accuse, report observations only. When we talk about pediatrics, we'll talk about signs of abuse and things that should make you suspicious. You are generally, if you give a report in good faith, they generally aren't going to, call you into court and say, hey, what's going on? You kind of have some immunity for it. You're not going to get penalized for reporting in good faith if you're wrong. You do also have to report elder abuse. There's adult protective services too. Any type of elder abuse needs to be reported. If there's an injury during the commission of a felony, so basically some criminal calls you after he committed some kind of crime, says, hey, I was robbing this bank, I had this person up at gunpoint and actually accidentally shot myself in the foot. Well, you have to report that. That's a requirement. And any drug-related injuries. This is more if you give a medication and there's a significant adverse effect. So this is not like street drugs. This is like medications that we give. There are reporting requirements for adverse effects for medications. We talked about crime scenes in a different lecture, but a little bit about crime scenes. So we obviously need to report anything we suspect is a crime scene. And again, do your scene survey, document everything, preserve evidence the best you can, and report that all to law enforcement. Sexual assault. We generally report this to law enforcement and retain evidence that is present. So any evidence that may be there, any clothing, or anything like that, we're going to keep in our chain of custody. Technically, we're supposed to have the patient's permission to report a sexual assault. Although if we don't get that, then the hospital that we take them to generally will get the patient's permission. A DOS. So if you have somebody who's dead on scene, this is definitely required reporting. Generally speaking, this is done through law enforcement, although it may be done through a JP. It depends on your local protocols, whatever those are. Document absence of vital signs. Document what you see. Document like a reason that you did not begin resuscitation. So if you have patient with rigor mortis, that's a sign of obvious death. So document that, any signs of obvious death. If you have to contact the coroner, then do that. If you contact law enforcement. And then don't disturb or move the body. So as EMTs, we're given a great deal of power, responsibility, and I'll add trust. People freely invite us into their homes. They trust us with their possessions. Trust us with their possessions. They trust us with their lives and those of their loved ones. We have a duty to act when called on for help. We have an ethical responsibility to understand what's right or wrong for our patient, even if it goes against what we personally believe. And we have a responsibility to act to our standard of care. So that's it for this lecture. If you have any questions, be sure to bring them into class and come ready to work through a few scenarios.